Hey, how you doing? We got another exciting video for History of Doodles, and we're going to be talking about Westward expansion. Also, we're going to talk about Manifest Destiny. Now, you will see if you pay close attention, I have gotten really high tech, and I've got a brand new projector. The bad news is I really don't know what I'm doing and how to make it work. So we're going to try our best today. If you see the focus going in and out, hey, I'm not trying to make you feel like you're on a roller coaster ride or make you feel like you're at a 3D movie. I am honestly just adapting to new technology. So good luck to both of us. Now, before we get started, just so you know, I've always got my trusty green, I got my trusty red, and I got a yellow marker because I like to use my yellow marker. And I'm going to throw in a gray and brown if you got them. If you don't worry about it. It's all going to work out because trust me, we know how to adapt while we're here, okay? So I'm going to spread out my sheet here and I'm going to get my Sharpie. I use a Sharpie, you do what you want. But I'm going to use the thick Sharpie to start off with, all right? And I'm going to make life a little bit easier, I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to fold it in half. Only reason I'm doing that is because to make it a little easier for me to bounce what I write on the paper. I'm going to do it one more time. Why? Because believe it or not, I like to make double sure I'm going to make good use of my paper. So we're going to make this work with a couple folds and make it a whole lot easier. Now, I understand that I have a reputation of just being a pretty face. Um, but I'll be honest with you, I'm so much more. I'm about organization, and I want to make sure that we have this well organized. Okay, so here's what we're going to start off with. You see how we got this paper here? I'm going to go just a couple fingers in right here. I'm going to go a couple fingers in right here. Okay, and I'm going to go up here. I'm going to go about 3 fingers down, maybe two. My goodness, you know what? We're upside down, aren't we? Let's try this out. Let's see what this says. Oh, that ain't going to work. There we go. Is that right? No, we're still not right. Once again, new technology. Bear with me. Okay, I got my 3 dots here. 2 fingers, 2 fingers, 2 fingers. Now I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it just a huge, big half circle. And no, it's not perfect. But you know what? It's pretty darn close. And now, this is where I get tricky. Watch this. What do you think I'm making here? It's not a Batman boomerang. It is going to be a very cool looking umbrella. Now, the reason I'm drawing umbrellas is because I want to create a main idea, a main topic up here, and everything else we talk about falls under the umbrella of those ideas. And the concept, the whole topic, the unit we're actually discussing is something called Westward expansion. When I write expansion, I'm going to expand it, make it big. Or the normal E, little bigger X, bigger P, A, N, S, I, O, N. Why? Because I want to emphasize the idea what expansion means. Is it means growth. It's going to expand and get bigger as it goes. And that's really what we're talking about with this entire concept. Now, the terminology we're going to learn first is something called Manifest Destiny. And I'm going to write Manifest Destiny, but I'm going to put it in big block letters because I really want this to stand off my page. And I got to kind of pace myself a little bit. So I'm going to start clear over here. And then everybody can do block letters. If you can't, just do big letters. Man. Uh. Fest. and a T. Manifest, and I'm going to ask the last word, destiny. Do you know what a destiny is? That's like when you, it's your future. It's something that's already planned out, already determined. Well, some people really believe in destiny. Like it was destiny that I married my wife. Or maybe it was just dumb luck. I don't know. That's not a very good ask. That's okay, though. And once again, you don't have to make this perfect. I just want to stand off my page a little bit. But I am going to do something. I'm going to color this in green. And the reason I'm going to add green is I want you to remember green is what we use for growth, making connections, progress. Well, Manifest Destiny does both that. It connects both the East Coast and the West Coast of our country. It definitely connects us to a lot of different ideas. And it was responsible for a substantial amount of growth in the early part of our country's formation. But a lot of things came with Manifest Destiny, some good, some bad, and we're going to discuss them. Now, just because I'm kind of funny about color, I'm going to add just a little bit of brown down here just because that's what my yardstick looks like, my holding stick looks like. Let's go back to Manifest Destiny. I got the green here for growth, connections, progress, but I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to highlight it around it in red. And the reason is because all this came from conflict. Even though there's growth and success and progress, there was also a lot of conflict. And we use red to denote conflict. When you look at this, I want you to think of both these concepts as being well, this concept being both a negative and a positive thing. If it wouldn't have happened, we wouldn't have the country we have now. And this country, for all of its faults, has done some really pretty incredibly great things. But none of that happened easy. And in some cases, it didn't happen very voluntarily. There were a lot of factors that created this country. Some of those factors were push factors. People were pushed into ideas that they didn't want to accept. And in other cases, they were pulled into ideas or opportunities because they saw themselves having a chance at a better way of life. So I'm adding this red here. Now, sometimes I know when people do these videos, they just turn down the volume and they just color and draw and la 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 la. When you do that, you miss out on a lot of really good information. And I'm going to explain this information by defining what manifest destiny was. Manifest destiny is the idea that the U.S., when I say U.S., I mean United States, Estados Unidos, was destined, supposed to, was meant to span from coast to coast. When I say coast to coast, I mean Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. And if you haven't talked about maps or haven't looked at a U.S. map yet or haven't done that stuff yet, I'm telling you, we're a big country. But we didn't start off as a big country. We had to grow and expand from one coast all the way to the others. And along the way, we ran into lots of obstacles. Now, some of those obstacles are just natural barriers to growth. I mean, everybody has it when they're trying to move up in society or do something important. But some of these things were, well, they're different kinds of obstacles, and we'll talk about this as the unit goes on. Let's talk about this growth here. For starters, one of the major topics in Manifest Destiny is something called the Louisiana Purchase. If you don't know what that is, that was a purchase made, orchestrated or led by or approved by Thomas Jefferson in the year of 1803 that literally doubled the size of our country. And this chunk of land was bought from France. Napoleon was trying to fund a war in Europe, and he saw this as an opportunity to make a little extra money. He just take it back later or something if he wanted to. But we paid him a good chunk of money, but we got a super good deal on the land. And like I said before, it literally doubled the size of our country. Now, when I put money down, I'm going to color that green because we know usually money is colored green. But I'm going to put down something, a really odd looking symbol. I'm going to put down, hopefully, it'll help you remember Louisiana. If you think of French fries, maybe you'll think of France. French fries, France. They had nothing to do with each other. They weren't invented in France, as far as I know. And they definitely had nothing to do with Louisiana Purchase, but sometimes weird symbologies like that will help you remember key details. So we got the Louisiana Purchase, one thing. On the flip side, as you start growing, expanding, you had issues with people who were already there. These people didn't realize that the Americans were now going to be owning the property they lived on for centuries, and that led to conflict. The Trail of Tears is really a pretty horrible, dark piece of our history. And it was the forced removal of Native Americans from their homeland. And some of these had been our allies and friends that we had treaties with, but we still packed them up and moved them because, to be honest with you, we just wanted their property. The Trail of Tears, in some cases, or some ways, could be described as almost a genocide. And genocide is just a wholesale killing of another group of people, because there were a lot of people who died on that trail who didn't need to die, and there were efforts made to make that even easier to happen. And those were, like I said, part of some dark times in American history. But the Trail of Tears was a byproduct of Manifest Destiny, because if we believe God wanted us to expand, and I'm going to put down this little symbol up here, because people believed it was the will of God that we're doing this, these indigenous people who are in our way were just that, in our way. It was okay to move them. We're going to talk a little bit about the Texas annexation. And once again, this will come up later on in a different video, maybe, or a different format of learning. But when you annex something, you add it. Texas actually had their own revolution from Mexico. And when they revolted against Mexico, they became their own independent nation. That's why we call them the Lone Star State. Well, after about 9 years of that, they wanted to join the United States. And when we allowed them to join, that's referred to as an annexation. I'm going to put the plus because when you add something, it looks like a plus. That led to growth to the U.S. Unfortunately, it also led to war with Mexico. And that war only lasted a couple of years. It was a pretty decisive victory for the Americans, but it was an example of the extent that people were willing to go to push this idea of manifest destiny. It's a gun, terrible looking gun. That's a terrible looking cannon. And back then, we're going to put a little sword here because they'd fought with swords back then too. Now a little bit of gray. This is my gray. I got a cannon, got a gun, got a sword. This is what they refer to as diplomacy with steel. And of course, Mexican War ended in an American victory. A lot of these people who fought in the Mexican War would later on use that skill and expertise to fight in something called the Civil War. But on the shorthand, it led to something called the Mexican Cession. And the Mexican Cession is where Mexico, as part of the treaty with losing this war, gave up California, New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Utah, Arizona, Nevada, all that southwestern part of the United States became part of the U.S. because of this particular war. And so with the Mexican Cession, I know it's an addition to America, but it was a detraction or a subtraction from Mexico. But eventually, when we get and we paid for that land, don't get me wrong, we paid I think $15 million for it, but it was a pretty ridiculous amount of money for the amount of land we got out of the deal. On the same note, we also bought some other property, a little better priced property for the Mexican side, something called the Gadsden Purchase. And we were able to make this purchase without any conflict, without any war. It wasn't a very big piece of land, but it definitely added to the American landscape. Once again, this is about growth. And then finally, when you talk about manifest destiny, you really got to talk about the people that were traveling back and forth. And a lot of those people were traveling into something called the unknown. It was a pretty scary time, but people were desperate enough or anxious enough to find opportunities in a new land. And they would pack up all their stuff in these giant wagons or on horseback or whatever, and they would travel to an area that wasn't so settled where maybe they can own their own land, own their own property. They could start something new, build something from scratch. Very famously, we talk about these settlers. A lot of them traveled on something called the Oregon Trail. Now we talk about the Oregon Trail. Maybe you've heard about it. You may even play the game Oregon Trail. But there was lots more than just the Oregon Trail. There was something called the California Trail. The Fornia Trail. There was something called the Santa Fe Trail. And don't forget, there was something called the Mormon Trail. By the way, if you live in the Midwest, specifically Iowa, these trails were a big part of being in the United States. Came right through Iowa, right near Iowa, um, right past Iowa. And some of them led to other trails, like the Oregon Trail. Once you get to a certain point, you would break off and take the California Trail. But either way, this is a big part of Manifest Destiny because it represents the idea that people are traveling and settling these new lands, going from one coast all the way to the next. Okay, lots of ideas, lots of concepts, lots of stuff to think about. Remember, our topic is Westward expansion. We're talking about Manifest Destiny, the idea that the U.S. was supposed to or meant to span from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast, Pacific Ocean, all the way to the Atlantic, or vice versa. And that represented itself in the Louisiana Purchase, the Trail of Tears, the War with Mexico, and the Texas annexation, the Gadsden Purchase, and of course the Oregon Trail, traveling back and forth through all this new territory that we had just gained from these different activities we've been involved with, designed to expand our country. Okay, lots of information. I'm going to pause on that for just a second here. Did a great job, and we're going to leave it at that. Thank you very much.